How's it going, guys? It's Harvey from Weather Sponge 5000, and in this video, of course, we're going to talk more about this next winter storm that could impact the Northeast, including the coastal Northeast cities where places like New York City, Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., and Boston could get involved. So take a look at the GFS model right now. There is a heavy amount of rainfall going on right over Arizona and California, and in fact, some portions of Southern California have received flash flooding from this influx of heavy rainfall moving through from this atmospheric river. My hearts go out to all of you affected by these floods, as it's really bad over there. Places like LA received right around their half of their annual average rainfall they receive in only 2 days, which is just a heavy amount of rainfall within a short period of time that's bound to create just extreme flooding right over the area. But thankfully, it should move out later on Wednesday and going into Thursday as the storm system continues to head further eastward, and it's going to bring heavy snowfall right over the higher elevations of the western portion of the United States, so definitely watch out for that. And moving forward with this storm system, it will eventually move northward into the Midwest, bringing some snowfall over North Dakota, and we talked about this in the last video, where this ridge is going to block this low from being able to move southward and bring the snow a little bit further southward into the more populated areas of the United States. So this won't be the storm system that will have any sort of possibility of bringing snowfall to the East Coast, but this next low pressure system will be, because we see right behind this storm system there's going to be another low that's going to move southward down the California coast, and there's going to be a decent amount of cold air behind it. It's a fairly weak low pressure system. We do see its millibar pressure is around 1010 millibars, so it isn't necessarily extremely strong to bring a heavy amount of convective activity right off the bat, but that's soon expected to change, which is common for many storm systems moving towards the east. Once they encounter this very warm and moist air mass right over the Gulf of Mexico or the Gulf Coast states, that's when they really begin to intensify fairly rapidly at that point. But at this point, it's still a fairly weak low pressure system, but you should still expect some heavier bouts of snowfall in the extreme higher elevations of the western half of the United States, so watch out for that over Utah, Nevada, Arizona. And then moving forward with the forecast, we're going to see another trough move southward coming off the Pacific Northwest coast. That's going to be even weaker. We do have isolated snow showers associated with this, but more importantly, there's plenty of cold air right behind it, so that's certainly going to enhance the instability and the lift enough right over the midsection of the country for a new potential snowstorm to develop, especially once this approaches the Northeast, once this encounters a little bit more cold air for all this precipitation to be in the form of snowfall. So moving forward with forecast, by the way, this is around Sunday morning into Saturday of evening as well, and we do see the rainfall does become a little bit heavier right over Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee for the Sunday morning time frame, but we do see this storm system continues to intensify. There's plenty of cold air behind it, and we do see somewhat of a stronger southerly flow from a weak ridge that's located just off the southeast coast. That's going to bring that warm and moist air mass a little bit further northward up the Gulf Coast. The same air mass that's associated with the Gulf of Mexico, that's certainly going to enhance the instability. And by the time we approach Monday, this low pressure system definitely becomes a decently amount stronger by the time we approach Monday morning, where we do see the millibar pressure drop down to 1004 millibars. There is a decent amount of convective activity right over the storm system, and as we continue to move forward, this only intensifies as there's going to be a small trough that's going to only enhance the instability. That's going to bring that cold air right over the Midwest as well as the Northeast for this storm system to not only encounter more instability for this to intensify, but bring enough cold air to the Northeast to where it should be a snow event for many areas right over the Midwest, as well as the northeast, where we do see a lot of this precipitation eventually changes over to snow, and this includes some of the Interstate 95 corridor cities like Washington, D.C. is getting involved with snowfall. Same goes for Baltimore, Philadelphia, as well as New York City. And going into southern New England as well, we do see a decent amount of snowfall on the northern side of this storm system, and the millibar pressure is quite low at this time, so I wouldn't be surprised if we do see gusty winds associated with this. And not only that, even if you're not going to experience snowfall from this storm necessarily, it still could bring a heavy amount of rainfall over the Delmarva Peninsula, Virginia, if this scenario were to be correct, which of course is still fairly uncertain at this time. We're around 153 hours out. So again, this is certainly subject to change, but definitely at least be aware of this. And what's interesting is that we have seen a trend with the European model where it's taking a track that's a little bit closer to what the GFS model is currently forecasting, because if you remember in my last video, the European model's forecast was leaning towards a track a lot further westward, which meant that the northeast would experience entirely a rain event and the heavier snowfall would be focusing more on the Midwest. But in the latest European model scenario, it's a little bit more aligned to what the GFS model is stating, where it wants to take a track that faces a little bit further straight towards the east rather than towards the northeast. So that allows the cold air on the northern side to still stay around in the northeast for the chance of snowfall to potentially be higher. But it's not necessarily to the point where a snowstorm develops, because in the European model scenario, the problem is that the European model expects this trough just to the north of the main trough that's expected, that would potentially develop into a snowstorm, to be a little bit too strong. And what that does is that that'll weaken the ridging just to the east of it, just enough for this not to really have much, so not really have something that would force it a little bit further northward, and that would prevent the storm system from being able to encounter the cold air associated with this trough, and that would prevent also the amount of instability the storm system encounters, because with a weaker southerly flow associated with a weaker ridge, that would mean that there's going to be less warm air that's going to interact with this very cool air mass that would create a little bit more lift for this storm system to work with. So we see a weaker storm system due to that scenario occurring, where the ridging just to the east of it's fairly weak, to a point where this doesn't move north enough for a snowstorm to develop. While it does become decently strong, it isn't really moving northward enough for this precipitation to be in the form of snowfall, and even then it doesn't bring any sort of precipitation towards the northeast in a scenario like this. So we're definitely going to need to pay close attention to the amount of ridging, but the fact that the European model does agree a little bit more that it's going to take a track that's a bit closer to what the GFS model is stating could indicate that the chance of a northeast snowstorm is a little bit more likely, and the chance of a Midwest snowstorm is a little bit less likely. Really just all depends on the ridging, which let me show you guys that right now, the 500 millibar height anomaly. And you're going to see that we have this big ridge over the eastern half of the United States, but moving forward, here's the main low pressure system that could develop into our next major snowstorm for the northeast. We see that there's this first trough moving through that's gonna definitely weaken the ridging just enough for this storm system to have a little bit of an open lane to move further eastward. But what's interesting is that the European model expects the ridging to get a little bit to be a little bit stronger than it originally anticipated, at least for the time being. And what that does is that'll slow down this storm system, and it's gonna slow it down to the point where this second trough that was expected to be the main catalyst that would weaken this ridge to move faster than this trough, and that would mean that the ridge would weaken a lot more quickly. So by the time this low is able to catch up to the East Coast, it's already too late. This trough already weakened the ridging just to the east of it, so this moves towards a due east direction rather than a northeast direction. That would enhance the possibility of snowfall. But if we were to take a look at a GFS model scenario. On the flip side, the GFS model doesn't expect this to occur because it doesn't expect the ridging, at least initially, to be as strong. So this storm system will move at an average speed, and it'll keep on pace with this second trough to the point where this trough won't move quick enough to weaken this ridging, and this storm system would keep pace just enough to be able to encounter this ridge and move northward up the northeast coast and bring a snowstorm to the northeast, which is exactly what we see in the 18Z run, where the ridging is, at least initially, is weaker, but is strong enough a little bit later to a point where this takes a slight turn to the north and we do see some snowfall over the northeast. So we're really going to need to pay close attention to how fast the storm system moves by the time this approaches the west coast. And you're probably wondering, when is the time frame we could expect the forecast to become a little bit more certain? I wouldn't say the forecast will become a little bit more certain until maybe the Friday timeframe, once this trough actually moves ashore right up along the Pacific coast, because that's when we'll get a good idea of how much ridging there's going to be just to the east of this storm system, or at least a better idea of how much ridging there's going to be. And we're definitely going to need to see the how fast this second trough moves just to the north of it, because that'll play a key role as well. So I'll say right around the Friday to Saturday time frame, that's when we really should see the computer models get a good idea of what's going to happen with this storm system. But still, a lot to really digest when it comes to the factors that could affect the trajectory, as well as possibility you receive snowfall in the northeast. So just make sure to stay tuned. But let's say the GFS model is the more correct, let's say the current GFS model scenario will be the scenario that's completely correct. So if we were to take a look at the GFS model's current forecast, we clearly see a relatively large area of 6 to 12 inches of snowfall right over the mid-Atlantic, where New York City gets involved with right around 7 inches of snowfall. Same goes for Philadelphia. Boston gets involved as well, and much of southern New England, Connecticut, Rhode Island, New Jersey, even into southern New Jersey, we get involved. And then Washington, D.C. and Baltimore are right up on the edge between receiving no snow to maybe 3 to 6 inches of snow, but it's going to be a fairly close forecast for you guys. And for areas like West Virginia and the extreme southern portions of Pennsylvania, right around the Mason-Dixon line, you should expect 6 to 12 inches of snowfall in a scenario like this if it were to come for fruition. But there's still a lot of time for the forecast to change. So definitely just stay tuned for more updates. I'll definitely keep you guys updated over the next few days with these videos. Because if we were to take a look at, and what doesn't help with the uncertainty is the fact that the European model currently, while it's closer to what the GFS model is stating as of this latest run, it's still just really far from what the GFS model is stating when it comes to the actual snowfall accumulation. It's a bit closer when it comes to projected path, but not necessarily closer really at all when it comes to the amount of snowfall accumulation it's forecasting, where it's just not expecting the storm system to produce any sort of snowfall. So that's why I emphasize to just stay tuned for more updates. By the time we approach a Friday to Saturday time frame, we should get a really good idea of what's going to happen with this storm system. So just make sure to keep watching, as I'll definitely keep monitoring this storm over the next few days. But that's it for now, guys, and I thank you guys for watching.